what about sex work is work? You know, or like as a legitimate form of work that can be legalized and protected. I mean,
What do you think about that?
I mean, it's weird. On the one hand, it's risky, but at the same time, to be able to, say, for example, control sexually transmitted diseases, it's a big issue right now.
Yes.
Like there's lots of AIDS cases here, so it's important to maybe recognize that number one, it's a growing industry that has big income. So in a way, if you legalize, number one, you tax it, but also you need to make sure that they don't spread the diseases. That's a issue of public health.
Yes.
I mean, perhaps they know more about it, but that's, on the one hand, that's an issue because of that, you know. Like at least you were able to monitor and control when you legalize something. Like when you legalize weed or like certain forms of drugs, that's a payoff. You need to spend and invest on regulating it, but at least you can control it and get revenue from it, you know. So, but that's one other thing with sex. And at the same time with women, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but as long as they're able, it's their body, their choice, diba? It's the only way they can survive in some sense, or they feel liberated. You know, if a woman feels liberated if they feel like men's eyes on them, why not? Feminists disagree and debate on the objectification of women, you know.
No, nga eh.
Yeah. Or men objectify themselves, and a lot of men are in sex work as well, or trans people, especially, you know. So I don't know how deep you've gotten into like sexual issues, you know, but I think there are certain podcasts that focus on that, but I think they've either disappeared or, you know, I think it's worth exploring.
Well,
you know,
a lot of the podcasts, especially those that came during the pandemic, were parang mga wala lang magawa eh. Kaya I wasn't really worried about parang wala na tayo pag-asa. Kasi yung mga artista nagka-podcast sila, 'di ba? Pero naisip ko pag nagpapasa, ang hirap kayang mag-podcast. 'Di ba? So can they really sustain it? And true enough, a lot of them parang one by one parang nawala sila, 'di ba? But going back to ang view ko sa sex work is sex work had been with us throughout human history.
It's the world's oldest profession.
Diba? That's why it's called that. Diba? So it's been, I don't think you can eliminate it. And sometimes merong mga bagay-bagay na hindi mo that just will exist. 'Di ba? Like ganyan, sex work, like war, conflicts, 'di ba? So if it comes up, we need to have regulation ng mga laws, so ganyan. If it is legalized, I think it's okay, but ang hindi ko lang gusto yung messaging na actually yung sex work is work. When it is sent as parang something na sex work is just like any other work. Like parang pupunta ka sa call center or you're a banker. It's not.
Siya. I mean, I've been told I've not done sex work.
Well, it's not. Just the psychological impact of it.
Okay.
And the social ramifications ng actions mo later on, maybe not now. But later on, it will kumbaga catch up on you.
Same can you said with any work, like working in a call center or being a deleter, diba? Like, you know, Nadine Luistre, like she goes to the internet and deletes the most horrible, violent, sexually explicit like thing. That has an effect, and that's a regular job. A lot of people have that. I met someone who does that for a living. Same thing can be said about being a teacher, exposed to students all the time. Or the youth.
Well, but there's iba yung first of all, there are really shitty men who can pwede na talagang bababuhin ka. Yung trauma, it is very real. And they pretend yung mga sumasali doon, they pretended to just parang they just block it out of their minds, but the trauma stays. And do you really want you again, I'm just after the message, I'm not condemning what they did. I'm just saying na if the idea na parang if sex work is being sold as a low consequence profession,
Right.
it is I don't think that is good. 'Di ba? Parang it is an alternative for women, parang
Right.
if you're a girl you can do this, 'di ba? Parang empowered 'yan. I don't think it's nothing is empowering if a stranger is coming on your face. Up to me, ha?
Well, maybe you should ask Saloma Salvi. You know,
Oh.
she seems to enjoy it. You know,
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
maybe you can ask someone who does an OnlyFans. Yeah, it's a
Oo
growing
nga.
industry, even here in the Philippines.
But then again, when there have been people like Mia Khalifa who came out after,
Yes.
parang regretting,
Sure.
'di ba? And I suppose I think that is why that is why it is. I don't think it's wise to encourage it as if it's a no consequence
Right.
thing. I think kailangan it takes a really special kind of woman to be able to do it and do it unscathed.
Right.
Come out of it unscathed.
I mean, again, I'm not an advocate for it. I'm
Oo.
figuring this out myself.
Yes,
But
yes.
at the same time, on the one hand, yes, all work has its own psychological and physical hazards. And I think that's the point of legalizing, so that these hazards can be protected, regulated. Like, for example, if you come forward and you've been raped, but you say that you're a sex worker, and then the police will not believe you and say that, pero like he's a client, right? But at the
That's
same,
a good point.
Yeah, you have to in a way get into that space. Like, what is the line between paid consent and like abuse of that consent? You know, because there's a set of like guidelines or informal rules. I don't know, as if I've been I've talked to people about it in this issue. You know, so yeah, that's why it's dangerous. And so, like all things, like for example, like even janitors or even construction workers, their work they're doing is dangerous. Do they not have the right to be insured? Or like if something happens in the construction work, it's like it's dangerous, right?
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Oo.
Yeah.
But the thing with sex work kasi is there is something inescapable talaga na about sex.
Yeah.
Which is I know there are people trying to abolish the stigma about sex, na parang no, you shouldn't if a woman sleeps around, then you shouldn't really care. 'Di ba may mga ganong sentiments eh.
Right.
And for to some extent,
Right.
I agree. It's none of your business.
Yeah.
It's none of my business. But the reality is, like sex work, it has always been in
gray area.
human history.
Yeah.
And I think it is really ingrained.
Right.
And there's no amount of tawag dito, indoctrination na pwede mong gawin for na parang iyaano mo yung babae na hindi, it's nothing. There really is something na inescapable in her deepest moment.
Right.
'Di ba? Mararamdaman niya yon that she was treated as a meat with no other value than to pleasure a guy. So it is kasi ganun talaga yung ginagawa ng mga lalaki eh. 'Di ba? Although may mga ibang meron ako isang kilala na patron. He was really just a lonely man and pupunta siya doon, hindi niya ginagalaw yung babae. He just really wanted
like an escort.
Parang company ng isang babae. Kasi loser siya eh. And siya, hindi niya, yun ang isang way niya. And ganun, addict siya doon. 'Di ba? It doesn't isa pang aspect 'yun na parang even men katulad niya, 'di ba? Nagiging addicted din sila and hindi rin nakakabuti sa kanya, no? 'Di ba? Being a patron of such. But that's a debate na that's something that needs to be discussed.
Sure.
'Di ba? And there are obviously different sides about that conversation.
Yeah, I mean there are perks to being able to legalize it, but the other question is, does our government have the capacity to regulate and protect all these women that potentially could come in. And while yes, there is a psychological and emotional scarring involved in long years of sex work, who's to decide when it's enough, and can we decide what's safe or not for a person? And while they're in it, do they not deserve protection?
Oh, yun ang mga ano, kasi like yung again, there are levels to this game.
Yeah.
Even in sex work, there are right now yung mga aluwa na parang some consider it sex work already eh.
Yeah.
Parang sumasayaw-sayaw ka doon. O kaya OnlyFans. Hindi ko alam may OnlyFans sa Pilipinas eh. Parang
there are. I've been told.
Oo, di ba?
I'm not subscribed.
But well, hindi na sa Pilipinas. Pero there are sex work na ano siya. Tawag dito yung mga masamasahe, 'di ba? Parang spakol, 'di ba?
Yeah.
'Di ba? Ibang sex work pa rin 'yun. But one, they are or yung mga nasa aquarium, 'di ba? Meron siyang ano yun doon talaga hindi lang spakol. Merong security doon. So kung let's say lalaki ka tapos you're gonna sasaktan mo yung babae doon, malilintikan ka. So safe ka doon relatively unless napakasama talaga nung ano. But for sure there will be a consequence if magloloko ka doon as a patron.
Yeah.
And then there are sex workers na yung mga namamara lang, 'di ba? Yung tingin ko mas mas delikado 'yun. Kasi wala kapag let's say makakuha ka ng siraulong customer, you are at the mercy of that person. 'Di ba? So these are different levels.
Sure.
So if you're gonna say sex work is work, which kind of sex work are you referring to?
That is a good question.
'Di ba?
Yeah. I mean, that's why law is that the laws that not only they make the boundaries between what is regulated and what is not, what is acceptable and what is not, you know. So yeah, in terms of like, in the same way, that's what we talk about another topic, marriage. You know, who can you marry? Can you marry your dog? Can you marry yourself? Can you marry, in Japan, people marry anime characters and JPEGs and pictures. So I think these are questions that become political when asked when you legislate it, you know. And again, you have to ask, like, can the government afford to regulate and decide on all these? Like, we have many laws, and if they're backed up and operate in floppy disks, baka di natin kaya. It's a good way to discuss it, though. I mean, it's like a lot of social issues, like with for example, gay marriage, sex work, you know, like a lot of things. Like when someone say everything is political, it can be political, you know, but we have to decide, like, should it be political? Like, should it be the business of the government to determine, like, what is safe sex and what is not? What about public morality or like regular decency, common sense? Some people would say it's common sense na parang there are risks. You're responsible for the risks that you take. Does the government need to spend its resources to protect you when, like we said, rough clients, diba? It's part of the game. But people can say the same thing. What about, do you not deserve protection when you go rock climbing or mountain climbing? Na parang, you know,
personal
it's risky.
Freedom, diba?
Personal freedom, yeah.
Well, kaya nga it's a dilemma, and again, it's inescapable that this is a resort na parang available option yan to any woman eh, na nakakaramdam ng desperation.
Yeah.
'Di ba? Ito isang fun I don't know if it's fun. Fun fact. Pero ano siya, according to kasi yung isang kaibigan ko, yung si Chris Bakula, aminado naman siya. So madami siyang aminado naman siyang patron siya sa ganun.
Okay.
And madami na siyang na-interview sa mga ganyan. When he asks bakit sila sa sex work? Wala mo ang number one answer?
Poverty.
Poverty? No.
Oh.
Yung malibog lang talaga sila.
Oh, I'm reminded, my God.
Oh, pero ano siya?
Yeah.
a lot of them, hindi alam ng pamilya nila na yun ang ginagawa nila. Meron silang mga alibis. Minsan may asawa pa.
Oh.
Oo, tapos hindi alam ng asawa. Akala nung asawa, everyday, hinahatid siya dun sa tapat ng call center. Akala niya dun siya nagtatrabaho. Diba?
Oh, I remember reading in the school paper, like apparently students from the private university have like they engage in like minsan macho dancing.
No.
Or minsan, sex work. Just because they're bored. So that's another thing. Like when you legalize it, are you giving license to these young people, in the gray area?
Kaya nga it's well, hindi man maitatanggi din that there is a moral aspect yan. Moral dilemma rin yan. And if you allow, if the government sanctions I suppose you can say degeneracy nung ibang mga, kasi let's say if you are kung mga yung mga it will depend kung if it's degenerate to you, but obviously some of these things are degenerate to others, 'di ba? If you're gonna parang sanction that, then moral decay can come soon afterwards, 'di ba? And after ng moral decay is yung societal decay, but 'di ba? It's it could be a real thing too.
Right. I mean, you can see like from other countries.
You can pull the mic.
Sure. From other countries, like say for example, classic example is Amsterdam. But then another example much closer to home is Thailand. It is a major sex industry. But at the same time, when you look at them, is there moral decay there? To an extent, I don't know. I mean, depending on your point of view, there's a stronger LGBT presence there. Like they're pushing for gay marriage, and it's quite close. If you're a Catholic, like that's moral decay. If you're a progressive, like no, that's progress. So it really depends on like how do you define moral decay? But it will change the way people behave. And that's, we have to look into the effects of that.
And that's what